The next of the Disney live-action remakes has officially released in theaters, which is, of course, Lilo and Stitch, directed by Dean Fleshercamp, starring Maia Kealoha, Sydney Agudong, Chris Sanders, once again, as well as Zach Galifianakis. This remake of Lilo and Stitch is once again about a lonely Hawaiian girl who adopts a runaway alien to help save her fragmented family. So we're going to go over this movie, and if you as a Christian should watch it right now. Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm your host Tim and we exist to help Christians live in the world, not of the world, by utilizing our convictions in the movies and shows we watch. Lilo and Stitch, the remake, is rated PG for some action, peril, and some thematic elements. So we're going to go over any convictions you may have in watching this movie, any theological themes that are present in this version of Lilo and Stitch, and give you my personal thoughts on the film. Without further ado, let's dive into the Christian Conviction Meter. If this is your first time here, the Christian Conviction Meter is a series of 5 convictions that are areas that may distract or hinder your relationship with Jesus. We have this guide and resource to help you find good movies to watch based on those convictions you have. So without further ado, let's dive into our first category. And starting things off with violence and gore. Of course, instead of it being animated, it is a live action movie, which means the action here is obviously a bit more realistic in a sense. But in terms of the action and violence and that sort of stuff that's contained within this movie, there's some blaster fire here, there's a few explosions, there's some damage, there's a lot of menace that is involved, some car crashes. A lot of it is just more kind of comedic action and comedic violence within this movie. It wouldn't say it's as crazy in terms of its action, hence why it's rated PG, but there are a few things to note here in terms of that sort of action. It's on par a little bit with the original Lilo and Stitch film because it is a remake. Once again, it's going to be just like the one for the animated movie, a 2 out of 5 here. Luckily for us, our next 2 categories, which is lust and substances, there is nothing to worry about in either subject of this film. There is nothing to worry about in terms of lust, and there is nothing to worry about in terms of any sort of substances. Both of these are going to be a 0 out of 5. However, there's a little bit of profanity contained within this movie, which is our next category. For the most part here, most of what we hear is kind of cheap, silly jokes. Butt is referenced, but that's also in the original movie, and it's not really profanity in general. Of course, you do have God kind of used in a more reactionary term rather than in praise and worship. And then, of course, there also is hell is referenced in a what the for that word, which honestly is very surprising, especially for a Disney movie, especially one that has a lot of little kids going to go see it in theaters or eventually watch it on streaming. So it is definitely very interesting just to be on the safe side here because of some of the stuff used here, mainly of course the use of hell. It's going to be a 1 out of 5. And wrapping it up with intense/horror sequences. This is not a horror movie, which means there is no horror elements contained within this project. There is some more deeper thematic themes that we'll touch on here in a second. Like I did mention earlier, there is just a lot of different damages and stuff that happens and overall kind of menace that happens throughout the film. Not necessarily into a intense level, but that is something just to keep in mind. But in terms of just thematic themes here, of course the big one is the fact that they do talk about Lilo and Nani's parents passing away. It is talked about a bit more than the animated movie, so that is something to keep in mind. Once again, it does not go into extreme detail, but it is talked about and the challenges that come with that. Of course, there also is the subplot of the social worker, and so there are these things to kind of keep in mind as they could be a little more emotionally charging for some viewers, and just of course keep in mind in general these things are a part of this movie. But overall, it's nothing that isn't in a similar vein to, of course, the original Lilo and Stitch, so it's going to be a 1 out of 5 in this category. So our grand total for the conviction meter is going to be a 4 out of 25. This is once again very low on the conviction meter. It is PG, which means you're going to have more areas that obviously are more audiences are able to see and able to not worry about as many convictions with this type of film rather than some PG-13 and of course rated R movies. So that is something to keep in mind. But like I always say though, if there's anything here that may distract or hinder your relationship with Jesus, anything of that sort, make sure to follow your convictions because they're God-given. If that means you don't need to watch this film, don't worry about it. Ultimately, make sure that you are following Jesus to the best of your abilities while we are here on earth. But anyways, that being said, let's talk about some theological themes that are present within Lilo and Stitch. And once again, just like the original animated movie, this one has a very similar theological themes of belonging and family, which of course Stitch finds. Once again, we do have that sort of monologue towards the end of the movie that Stitch has about finding his family. And yes, it's not perfect, and yes, it's broken, but there is something good here. And so that also is true of the body of Christ, the family of God, right? It's has flaws, right? It's broken. There is people who, stumble and make mistakes because that's the world we live in. We live in a broken and fallen world. And so mistakes are unfortunately inevitable. But the idea of still coming together, that there's still goodness, that we come together not by necessarily blood relation, but we come together through the blood of Jesus. And so that's what makes us a family. And so, again, it's not an explicit tie to Christianity, but it is something that you can definitely pick up in watching either one of these movies. And so that is something I definitely enjoy about this one. But again, other than that, there is nothing explicitly Jesus-centered or Christian about Lilo and Stitch. So with that wrapped up, what are my thoughts on Lilo and Stitch? And for a live-action remake, it's actually not terrible. Usually I go into these with a low expectation because of the fact that the animated movies are always going to be superior. I have not watched a single live-action remake that is better than the original. And that is the same case here. The live-action Lilo and Stitch is nowhere near the animated Lilo and Stitch. I mean, the animated one is a fantastic film. This one is honestly pretty solid though. To start off here, the story, obviously, while similar to the animated version of Lilo and Stitch, it does change a few things here. It pretty much changes the entire back half of the movie because it got rid of one of the characters that is present within the animated movie. This causes one of our characters to take a more villainous turn, and I'm not the biggest fan of the change here. And in general, I'm not a big fan either of Jumba, right, in this film. Zach Galifianakis, I think, has some roles that are really good and some that are not as good. I would say this one, I don't know if this is the right role for him. Granted, he had some big shoes to fill with David Ogden Stiers, of course, one of the most iconic voice actors of all time, stepping into that role, and it's just hard to fill those shoes there in particular. But while we're talking about actors here, I do want to give a special shout out to Maia Kealoha, who is introduced for the first time in this film. This is her first role in a movie, but she did really well. I think she was honestly a great Lilo and really delivered on her character and how she is and the emotional moments that come with this film. I think she did a really solid job, and so great job. The other thing here is, of course, the standout here is going to be Chris Sanders reprising his role as Stitch. He's infamously said that he wants to do this role as much as he can, that he's the only one who wants to do this role, and I applaud him for that. And so whether it's been video games or movies or TV shows, he has done it all, and he returns in this role and does it great. There's a couple fun new moments in this one, couple new fun humor Stitch moments that I think are done really well. I think that is some of the more better parts of this film. I know more better is not proper English, but we're gonna go with it here. And continuing on, they really highlighted Lilo and Nani's relationship, so much so that Nani actually has a bit of a character arc in the film, and she actually is a character of like substance. Like, it's not just older sister who's trying to find a job. There is a whole life and kind of backstory she's given, and it's done very well in this role. And obviously just adding the backstory elements to her, I think made Nani a much stronger character in this film compared to the original animated movie. And while there are things to like about this movie, there are a few flaws. The CG here is pretty decent. It does have one of the lower budgets in terms of a Disney live action remake, but the CG here isn't bad. The other thing here is the pacing is very inconsistent throughout the film. If we jump to the beginning of the film, it feels like we're just going at like 100 miles an hour, and so much so that we're really not able to catch our breath in most cases, where we're not allowed to breathe. But the moments we are able to breathe and really sit in those moments, usually when it's a more emotional moment, it's done very well. But this film, I think, does struggle with a much greater fast-paced nature than even the animated movie. I mean, the animated movie moved pretty consistently, but its pace was still overall really solid. This felt extremely quick, and so much so that it actually felt like it was a shorter movie than the original, but yet it wasn't. It actually is a bit longer, but the pacing here was not as good as it could have been. Overall, it's one of the better live action remakes we've gotten, especially this year, because Snow White was not good at all. But obviously, they're not comparable to the animated movies. Every single time the animated movie is going to be better than the live action remake. But overall, it's decent. There are some good things to like about the movie, but it also does have its flaws. It does have some moments that could be better, some moments that could have been done just a little bit tighter or a little bit longer to allow us some more breathing room, allow us to really just sit in some of these moments here. But overall, it was pretty decent. It's not a terrible film, and it's not a phenomenal, great movie by any means. So overall, I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10. It might be higher for most other people. There's things I enjoy about the movie, and the pros for me outweigh the cons here, even though there are some flaws like I talked about. So overall, those are just what I think and my thoughts on the film. So it's a 4 out of 25 on the conviction meter. It's a 7 out of 10 on our review scale. Those are my thoughts, so let me know yours down in the comments below. Let's chat all things about Lilo and Stitch in the comments. The question that I have for you is, do you prefer this one or the animated one? I probably could guess the answer, but let's talk about it in the comments down below. And while you're down there, consider hitting that like and subscribing for us, joining our community here on YouTube. It just helps to send us out into the algorithm, allows us to reach just more Christians so they can utilize their convictions to ultimately follow Jesus better. And that's our ultimate goal here on the channel. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend time with us here. We truly appreciate it. It means the absolute world to us. But before you go, there's a few video recommendations over here that YouTube is recommending to you. One of which is the animated Lilo and Stitch. And if you want to join us over there, I'll see you all then.